Hi, I'm Cheryl, and I'm going to use my 6-step approach to create a budget for one of my followers. Let's get started. This client is a follower from Greeley, Colorado. They are an executive director. Their annual salary is $110,000. To get a better understanding, they're a single parent. Their primary goals is to pay off credit cards. And lastly, they would like to take a family vacation to Costa Rica. So these are the things that I keep in mind as I'm preparing a budget. So let's go. The first step in the 6-step approach is going to be that budget preparation. The budget preparation sheet lists the bill name, the amount, the 1st to the 15th to the 16th of the end of the month. This is going to allow you to prioritize your bills by their due date. Then the amount outstanding is going to be for any debt. So in particular, since we're going to be focusing on their credit card debt, we're just fill this out for our credit card debt, which at that point, we're going to want to know what the interest rate is and if it's auto draft, yes or no. So which means it's automatically going to be paid out of your bank account. You don't have to initiate a payment. The payment is automatic. Typically, a lot of our fixed expenses are that way, but not all of our variable expenses are that way. In step number 1, the best place to start is to come over to the Excel or Google Sheets spreadsheet, which is available in the budgeting bundle of the annual budget. And the reason why is because it's going to categorize all of the expenses, and then it's going to give you sample expenses in each category. So that way then it'll help to guide you to make sure that you're not forgetting any expenses. Okay, so once you start there, then what you're going to do is you're just going to start listing out all of the expenses. Mortgage on the 1st, and yes, that's auto draft, all the way down. So let's go ahead and do that. It's important to note when we have something that we're going to split up, or that's like a full amount for the month. So a lot of our variable expenses, so like for example, fuel, groceries is usually another one, dining out, takeout, things like that. Usually we'll figure out how much we're going to spend for the entire month. So in this case, their budget is $180 for the month, which is $90 every 2 weeks. So then we're going to divide that 180 in half. So that way then we can plan for $90 during one half of the month and another 90 during another half of the month. All right, we filled up the entire page, but we still need more expenses. So we're going to need another page. So I'm using GoodNotes. You can come up to this 4 square right here, click directly on the slide that you're working on, and do add a page after, and it'll give you the option to duplicate the same exact page. And there's a clean one. Now I like to change the color when I'm dealing with loans and credit cards. Now, what's important to note when you're listing your credit cards, the amount that you're going to use is your minimum amount due on your last bill or at your current time. Okay, so you're going to want to make sure that you are looking up and using that minimum amount due. I'm going to add up everything in this column, and I'm going to call it a total of page 1. So you could go ahead and add everything up. Then what I'm going to do next, I'll bring over the total of page 1, but then I'm going to add up all of the expenses that are here on page 2, which are 1109. Then I'm going to make sure that that 1109 and that 4547 together matches the amount that's on my spreadsheet, which is 5656, and both of those numbers together do. Then what you want to do is you want to add up all of the expenses that are going to be due during this half of the month, which is 3100, and then 1447. And we'll carry those over here. Make sure that these two numbers together add up to that, which they do. And then you would do the ones that are on page 2. And when all is said and done, we have a grand total of 5656 for all of the expenses, but the amount of money that's going out between the 1st and the 15th is 3863, and then 1793 for the second half. Now what we're going to do is take our income, which after taxes comes out to 6318 a month. Then we're going to take our expenses, which is our grand total, that 56, and then we're going to find out what that amount is, subtract it, and that's going to give us approximately, I mean, the actual number is 662, but I always put an approximate. Why? Because I like to build in a little buffer. So approximately 662 is the anticipated surplus. That's how much we're going to be trying to hold on to throughout the month. Okay, this is the amount of money that we're going to try when we budget to find out where it is throughout the month so that we can hold on to that money. We're ready to move into step number 2. So step number 2 for that client from Greenley, Colorado, is going to be the monthly budget. Put down our total income for the month, which is that 6318. Now what's important here is our fixed and our variable expenses. Okay? What's a fixed expense? A fixed expense is an expense that's the same dollar amount on the same day every month. That's going to include your mortgage, your rent, your car payments, any kind of insurances that you have, and then all of your utilities. Your utilities are considered fixed expenses, where your variable expenses are expenses that are not consistent for one or more reasons. Either they don't happen on the same day, or they don't happen at all. They might not happen at all for the month. It could vary in how much money it is per month. Include all the things that you're spending money on that you would have to put a budgeted amount to. So like your food, your fuel, all your personal things. So getting your hair done, your nails done, if you get your house cleaned or your pool cleaned, all your subscriptions are going to go on here. And then the last thing that would go on here would also be your credit cards. So let's go ahead. The first thing that I always recommend that you do is you come back to step number 1 and you highlight all of those expenses that we're going to be cutting in half. And you put them in the correct category of whether they're fixed or variable. Most of the time, they're all variable expenses. That's the reason why we're able to cut them in half. So all of those expenses I would bring over and I would put them in first. So that's what I'm going to do. And once those are all in, then I can go ahead and fill in all the rest of the expenses based on their due dates and put them in order. Once we've listed everything out, we're then going to add up everything that's in this column for the fixed expenses. And then we're going to add up all of our variable expenses. And we're going to make sure that together, the two of those total the same amount that we had previously, which they do. And we're just going to make sure that we're consistent and all of our numbers carry over. Once we've finished that step, then we're able to move into step number 3. Step number 3 is the paycheck budget. And we're going to continue working on that paycheck budget for that client from Greenley, Colorado. And we're going to start with their income of August 16th. And that was $31.59. Now, all of those expenses that we cut in half over here, we're going to bring them over here and put those half amounts in. So originally, the budgeted amount for fuel was $180. So now we're going to bring 90 over. And the C stands for cash because those are all cash funded. Now, just like we did before, when in GoodNotes, we can go up to the 4 square and we can duplicate that slide. And now what we're going to do is we're going to change the date to the next time that they're going to get paid, which is going to be September 1st. And now when we look at our fuel, $90 here plus $90 here, that totals our $180 that we have budgeted over here. What's important here to note is it does not matter that one half of the month is August and the other half is September. It doesn't matter. What's most important is we're doing a paycheck budget, so you're going based on your paychecks. Now what you're going to do is you're going to put all your bills that are due between those two paycheck periods. So in this case, it's going to be the 16th to the 31st. And then over here, it's going to be the 1st to the 15th, right? Because everything, if they get paid on the 16th, this paycheck has to cover all the bills from the 16th to the 31st. And this paycheck needs to cover all of the bills from the 1st until the 15th. Now what we're going to do is go back and finish filling in all of the rest of the expenses. Now what we're going to do is add up each section. And then you're going to get a grand total for each page. And you're going to add this and this together and make sure that it adds the 56.56, which it does. And that's how much money is going to go to the surplus log. And then we're also going to add up all of our cash. And that's the amount of money that we would take out to fill out our cash binders. Now we can move on to step number 4, which is the surplus log, continuing on for that client from Greenley, Colorado. So now we're going to take that surplus amount that was from each paycheck budget and we're going to put it over here. So on this August 16th, we put $625. And on September 1st, we did 25, which made it 650. Then on September 1st, we're going to take that 650 and we're going to make an emergency fund with it, which is going to bring us back down to nothing. Now my total surplus amount is $650. My amount for debt is going to be $400, and my amount for sinking funds is $250. Now, if she was going to do any savings challenges, she would be using that from this $650. So your surplus amount, this is where most people struggle, is most people know that they're supposed to have money left over at the end of the month, but they're unable to, number 1, identify where that money is, number 2, have that money, and number 3, they still feel like they're living paycheck to paycheck. So by doing each of these steps in the order in which I just showed you, it'll help you to identify how much your surplus is, where it is throughout the month, and how to gain control of that money so that way then you can have your surplus back. So now that we have a $650 surplus, she can now spend and allocate that money as she wishes. Now that's where we put into consideration all her personal factors that we went over earlier before step number 1. Her primary goal is to pay off her debt, but additionally she would like to save some money. So what we're going to do is then move right over into step number 5. And we're going to do an emergency fund first because she didn't have any. So for her emergency fund, based on her information, I just took an extra month's worth of her surplus, and then the rest would be a savings fund. Which is 10-1 and 11-1. Now let's go back to step number 1 so that we can work on step number 6. Step number 6 is going to be the debt snowball method. In order to do this, we come back over to step number 1 and we would put our debt in order based on the least amount to the greatest amount. So step number 6 is using our debt calculator. My recommendation is usually the snowball method, which is where you're going to focus on paying down your debts based on the outstanding balance. And you're going to start with the lowest outstanding balance, working your way up to the highest. If you choose to work on interest, that's called the avalanche method, and that's where you would prioritize your debt based on the debt that has the highest interest, working its way down to the lowest interest. I usually recommend working on just credit cards first. However, when I met with this client, she did express that she wanted to have both her loans and some of her loans and her credit cards paid down simultaneously. So she told me which she'd like to include. So I went ahead and I used the snowball method, including those. So when I put them in order, the enter is going to be the first one. Then the second one was Chase. The third one was Capital One. And the fourth one was Wells Fargo. So she chose to include the Enter because it did have an 18% interest rate and the other 2 loans don't have any interest rate. So then we would come directly over here to our calculator. where we would enter in the name of the debt, and then we put in the starting balance, the minimum amount, which is what you budgeted throughout the entire 6-step approach, and the interest rate. And then you would go ahead and put them in order all of the way. Up here, it's going to add up what all of your minimum amounts due are. So all of her minimum amounts right now are $440. So in order for the snowball or the avalanche method to work, your understanding going into this is that you're already paying $440, that you're going to continue paying $440 from the very first day that you start making your payments until the very last day that you make your last payment on your last debt. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that when EnerBank is paid off, that $687 does not go back into her budget and she spends that money elsewhere. That means that she would take that $687 and she would, I'm sorry, the 60. So what does that mean? That means when the EnerBank is paid off, that $64 wouldn't go back into her budget. That $64 would then go ahead and get added to the $66 of Chase, and you would then send Chase the $64 and the $66. Then once the two of those are paid off, both of those would then be added to the $119. That's the method that you would apply even if you don't have anything additional to add to your snowball. So you can still snowball your debt even if you don't have any extra money from surplus to add to it. In order to snowball it, you would just be snowballing those minimum amounts. Okay? Usually what ends up happening is most people would take that money and put it back into their budget and spend it elsewhere instead of being intentional and putting it towards their next debt. By adding an additional $400, that's going to take her $12,100 worth of outstanding debt, and it's going to drop her from her original debt-free date of October 2030 to January 2025. Which is 17 months. So she'll be able to pay off all of her debt in 17 months and save herself almost, 4 years and a few months. Once all of these steps have been completed, you can go through and then clean up all of your original slides, and now you've completed. Make sure you follow for part 2 on how we do the cash envelope system.